Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Pioneers of Bitcoin podcast. My name is RK and today's guest is someone very special. His name is Rahim Taghizadegan. Rahim is half Iranian, half Austrian and is widely known as the last Austrian economist of the Austrian school in the direct tradition. He was the first person to ever teach about Bitcoin at a university level and has written 15 books and founded Scholarium, where the Austrian school is taught in its original form. Originally trained as a nuclear physicist, Rahim now focuses on investment and education, helps build Bitcoin citadels, works on privacy-focused tools on Nostr and RGB, and is based in Zug, Switzerland. In this conversation, we dive very deep. We compare the Austrian school with the dominant Keynesian way of thinking, and we talk about Rahim's journey to understanding and embracing Bitcoin, and we explore his views on inflation globally, sanctions, and the current situation in Iran. We move between political and macroeconomical topics and really try to connect the big picture with what it means for individuals to try to protect their freedom and their savings. I'm excited to share this one with you, and here's my conversation with Rahim Taghizadegan. Have fun listening. Rahim, welcome to our podcast. Thanks for taking the time to come on the show. Really pleasure having you. Your background looks amazing. We were just talking offline. You're in Panama, right?
Yeah, just right now.
Wow. I wish I was there where you are right now. I mean, it's also nice here where I'm in Dubai right now. We met in Abu Dhabi, as you remember. How was the conference, by the way? Did you enjoy your time?
Yes, yeah, I was positively surprised.
Positively surprised, really? Why?
Well, yeah, generally a bit skeptical about Bitcoin conferences, and then in particular, Bitcoin magazine conferences.
It was quite empty, in my opinion. I expected more people to show up, but I'm glad that I met you. I mean, I saw you on a few German podcasts. I think you were on Nico's podcast once. I saw you there, and I really wanted to talk to you about your story and what brought you to Bitcoin. It's very interesting because you have a very, I mean, it is not surprising because you're an Austrian economist, right? And we Bitcoiners, we all believe that Bitcoin is the closest thing that every Austrian economist actually wants. Maybe you can add your take on that as well. But I would say let's maybe start with your story. How did you start your journey? Maybe you can start from the very beginning. I mean, I was really curious when I heard your name first to talk to you in Farsi, but you told me that you actually don't speak Farsi. I thought you would speak Farsi.
It, but speaking is difficult.
Speaking is difficult, yeah.
I'm not fluent.
Okay, but you speak a little bit, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great.
I would have to spend a month or two in Iran again to be able to speak it well.
But you're not full Iranian, right? By blood, you're half Iranian.
Yes.
Half Iranian.
My father's from Iran, but I'm born Iranian. Spent my first 1.5 years in Iran. And since then, I've grown up in Austria.
I see. Which part of Iran?
Northwestern Iran, but at the time my family was living in Tehran.
Okay. Because my family is also originally from Ardabil, the north, the Turkish part of Iran. But I also grew up in Germany. I was in Iran until I was 12 years old. So I came much later. And but this is now about you. So tell me a little bit about you, your upbringing. What brought you into this, I would say, school of thought of economics, because there's not many Austrian economists out there, right? There's not many out there. I would be really curious to understand what made you become an Austrian economist. How did your journey start? And then we build it from there.
Yes. I was always a curious person, and growing up in Vienna, Vienna was pretty boring at the time when I grew up. I still think it's relatively boring. It's a beautiful tourist city. But what led me out of this boredom was books first. So I was a voracious reader as a kid, and was just curious. And I was looking for the most difficult field to study, and someone told me it should be physics. So I became a nuclear physicist first, but also studied economics and sociology in Vienna. And then this curiosity, I think, led me to figure out that there is an Austrian school. I learned about it in the US, in the United States, where I went as a nuclear physicist to work for a while. And then it was just odd because I had been studying economics in Austria, but never really heard about the Austrian school being alive and still a thing. And that caught my surprise, and that got me interested. And then I found the last teachers of that tradition, and one was a German entrepreneur, and the other one was also German, but at the time living and teaching in the US as a professor. And they became my mentors and teachers. And for me, it connected a lot of things because I had this interest in the natural sciences and the humanities at the same time. And there are various Viennese or Austrian traditions in these fields that have very interesting overlap. So at the time when the Austrian school emerged, Vienna was among the 5 most important and biggest cities in the world. It's like Dubai or Shanghai today. And you had a lot of interesting, bright people move there. And it was people looking for reality as a kind of opposition to the German idealism that in the German-speaking area was quite dominant. And so it's realistic approaches in a wide variety of fields. And yeah, I've had this interdisciplinary interest for a long time. And I turned it into my task to continue this tradition.
Okay, for your journey, when you started this journey, did you actually study the other school of thought first before you studied Austrian economics, or was it the opposite way? Did you study Keynesian economics first?
Yeah,
Because
that was dominant, but then they're studying and studying. Studying at university is overrated. It's not that important. I had been studying from a very early age just by reading. And then really the internet opened up another world that led me out of this boredom. So first it was libraries, and then it was the internet, and that had a crucial impact on me. So a lot of my education came through books and the internet later on, or access to, of course, digital books, articles, forums, and stuff like that. And so I was a very early internet user in Austria already in the 90s. And so I'd say that's part of my education. And then, of course, it's the 2 mentors or teachers I thought. They were never my professors at university, but they became my mentors. And mentoring is like you have a correspondence, you meet, and you try to learn as much as possible and absorb a school of thought. But at university, of course, and it was Keynesianism, the dominant thinking, or a mix of Keynesianism and the modeling kind of scientifically looking economics, econometrics, and stuff like that. And I remember I had like shouting matches with some of the professors because they tried to convey this. That's like the neutral scientific point of view, but it didn't make much sense. And for me, the contrast was so stark because in the natural sciences, I was used to like pointing out errors. Even the professor could make an error on the blackboard, and you just point it out and you discuss it and then figure out if you're wrong or he's wrong. But in economics, it turns into ideology immediately. It's like, oh, you doubt that. Yeah, so And I thought, okay, that doesn't look like a science. And they couldn't bluff me with the maths because I was already trained in physics and maths. So usually my natural science background was stronger than from the professors in economics. So I could call that bluff just by writing forms on the blackboard. You're not doing science.
Let's actually do that. I mean, you said you had a fight with that university professor. Let's maybe before we continue about your journey, lay out the main difference between the two schools of thought for the audience to understand. So, if you had to explain this in very, very simple terms, if you could boil this down, and I know it's actually much more nuanced, and it has, you need to basically explain much more in order to make more sense. But just for the audience to understand, what is the main difference between the traditional way of Keynesian economics that people are used to in everyday school to think about economics versus the Austrian way of looking at it?
Yes, it comes from absolutism. It's like a monarch or king who suddenly thinks that he's the manager of the economy. Like in the past, kings had a different function, but
That's the
then in
Keynesian.
modernity,
That's the Keynesian, right?
that approach is
Yeah.
like someone manages the economy. And it's always from a top-down perspective. It's usually it's like a technocratic experts or they consult those in power. And it's always a perspective of you got to look at it the whole, you got to understand it and model it, and then you fix it. You fix the economy because people are stupid, they are uneducated, they make all kinds of wrong decisions, and you need the adults in charge to supervise and fix everything for a modern economy to work because it's so complicated. So let's have the experts and then let's have the powerful models and stuff like that. And the Austrian school has a very different approach. It's a bottom-up approach. We respect order when we see it because we know that most of the order around us is not organized by human beings. There's no single human being that invented language and gave us the rules. It was a discovery process of people trying to communicate. And the very same thing happens in economics. It's a constant discovery process, like what works out, what doesn't work, what do other people want, what can I use to communicate value, what can I use to store value? And it's lots of decisions that we do, and we adapt to the decisions by others. So it's a complex system. It's not only a complicated system, it's a complex system, like a living thing is a complex system. And this leads to a lot of restraint, and don't try to fix something that you don't understand. Try to understand first. And if you go about fixing something, start small. Like, can you fix your life? Could you run a little business? Okay, then I'm hearing your advice. But I would never be so stupid to take the advice of someone who can't even manage his own life, let alone a small business, to like manage the euro or the world economy or something like that. And then if you have this perspective, it really seems crazy. It's like how could you believe that someone, and if you look at economic experts or politicians, of course the image is bleak. What are you seeing? Politicians these days usually aren't even able to run their own lives well. It's a lot of failed existences and people who can add no value whatsoever to the world around them. That makes them so dependent on the structures they are building. And if you look at economists, it's a clear fact that if you ask economists for predictions, like what's actually going to happen, it's better to roll the dice because they are not even randomly wrong. They are on average more wrong than just random choice. And the better known the economists, the more famous, the worse are the actual outcomes of compared to their predictions. So there is no economic science that somehow gives you a crystal ball. There is no economic science that gives you any tool whatsoever to be better able to manage the economy. But there are lots of tools to conceal interests, to create legitimacy, to actually fix the economy of some people, usually economists and politicians, and ruin the economy for most people. And that's unfortunately the story of economics. It's a fake science made up to conceal interests. legitimize them by looking scientific.
I mean, you know more than me about the history of economics and the way the world is running. Since when are we running on this new paradigm that we call Keynesian economics? Since when is that?
Oh, it's a very gradual thing. It didn't start with Keynes. Just Keynes was an exceptionally intelligent and eloquent person. This intelligence led, of course, to overestimate how important intelligence is understanding something, because it's a high risk. If you're smart, you always think you're too smart. You think you figured it out. And I think that happened with Keynes. And also Keynes was, I mean, his moral principles are quite doubtful, I'd say. Like in his life, he was pretty pragmatic and even hedonic, like he wanted pleasure and not always in good ways.
Yeah, I've
And
read about that. I've read about
that's a
that.
kind
Yeah.
of the Machiavellian tradition is like you
Yeah.
gotta be pragmatic and you gotta say, yeah, sometimes you have to lie. I mean, it's like everything it takes because you're managing something important. And if people are stupid, I mean, you can't always tell them the truth. Is this kind of pragmatism and then morality, like it's only a tool to achieve something? And so Keynes was just an exponent of that. And Keynesianism is much worse than Keynes himself, because it turned into a system, into a toolkit, into a legitimacy thing. Now, Hayek was a close friend of Keynes, actually. Hayek, the proponent of the Austrian school.
Yes.
Because, I mean, Keynes was a fun guy to be around. He was very smart. He thought about economics. He even thought about like speculation and trading, and he dabbled in that. But Keynes told to Hayek, "Oh, don't worry, I'll just snap with my finger, and everyone will do the opposite of what I've been saying, because I know it's not true. It's just working. I want something that's working." And part of that being working meant to lie to people, to conceal something. So he used inflation as a tool to conceal to the labor unions that actually the real purchasing power of wages goes down, because he thought very pragmatically that, you can't convince the labor unions to lower nominal wage rates, like pay people less money. And that was important in Great Britain, because the productivity has been going down so much and people are still retaining the same salaries. I mean, you'd lose more and more market share because your labor cost is too expensive for the lower productivity. And he thought, the way around it is just like inflate the money, and the people will have higher salaries. And of course, over time, they realize that the purchasing power goes down, but that's the way actually to make an economy more productive. And in that limited sense, it's not wrong. But Keynes thought, if it doesn't work anymore, he'd just snip with his finger, and people would do anything the scientific economist would tell them to do, if they understand that's actually in their interest, because he's like part of the technocrat ruling class and elite. And so he got to figure out what's best for us, this elite in power.
You already gave a few consequences of Keynesianism, and we're seeing it with our own eyes everywhere in the world. But for the audience, can you maybe lay down what the consequence of both sides would be, in your opinion? I mean, have we had a time where we actually lived through an Austrian economic system that produced wealth and abundance? And if yes, how does that look versus the Keynesian economic system that we have today?
Yeah. The big difference is that Austrian school does not create a system. It's not a utopian thinking. It's really just trying to understand what is. And we see there's always wealth production. There's always been, as long as human beings are around, we've been cooperating, we've been exchanging value, and we tried our best. Even in socialism, where you have a dominant planned economy, even the Soviet socialism, it was like up to half or 40% of the whole value produced is produced privately by people taking little decisions, usually in the black market in socialism. So it's always quite gradual. Yes, there are amazing miracles of wealth production, but they are quite limited. So it's always been minorities and short phases in history. But that's enough over time it accumulates. So that's how Europe became the wealthiest part of the world and how parts within Europe became wealthy. And they became wealthy by understanding the importance of trade, having a decentralized structure so you can move, you have a mobility of goods and then a mobility of capital. And that mobility of capital, you want to have a liquid form of capital that you can communicate, but that retains its purchasing power, because then you can start planning in advance. Then you can start accumulating capital and do investment at the right time, not when you're able to, but at the right time to make the right bets in entrepreneurship. And that led to a discovery process. No one created it as a system. It was a discovery like language. So merchants discovered a language, and they discovered two things. One thing is the double entry bookkeeping, which is a kind of communication protocol that allowed them to deal with a trust issue of communicating money over long distances. Like they'd settle their balances at the trade fairs, the big trade fairs, and they do it based on double entry bookkeeping. And then they discovered an algorithmic standard of money by realizing that you want to have something that everyone can verify, every one of the merchants, and that doesn't depend on an organized top-down set standard. So they realized if we look at the coins, there are lots of different coins. They all have different faces and different numbers on them, and they change constantly. So they started defining their unit of account as the pure weight of the precious metal within the coin. And once you have that, it's really a physical or chemical process in verifying if that standard and how much of that standard is within a transaction. So they started setting their transactions in the ledgers based on that standard. So it's two principles that are very similar to what was discovered with Bitcoin again, and most people haven't discovered it yet, what's actually happening there. So it's a discovery of protocols, and wherever these protocols were working well, you see the centers of wealth. But they have to move in Europe, because always when there's wealth, it attracts plundering. It attracts people that see, oh, wow, there's a lot of wealth to be made. Oh, it's really hard. It's very uncertain. I don't want to take these risks. Yeah, just give it to me, or give to me 10%, 15%, and 50% of everything you make. And of course, that's the racket of plunderers that's been happening all the time. And for Europe, it was really crucial that those standards allowed mobility of capital. And then mobility of capital allows mobility of people. So you could move part of your wealth, you could go to different parts. And we see how the center of wealth in Europe, it just shifts. It moves from northern Italy to northern Europe, then to the Netherlands, from the Hanseatic League, the Baltic, German cities, and then onto the UK, based in London, and then onto the US over the oceans. And this mobility really has been crucial. But it's not a system. No one organized it. No one could see in advance where the next center would be. It's this kind of discovery process. But yeah, we can identify the principles, the first principles, what it was built on, and then we figure out why the destruction of money, because people wanted to fix it, has led to really bad results. And the bad results are a big distortion of the economic structure. Is you distort the language of merchants, basically. You have a lot more misunderstandings. You have a lot more problem of people seeing the value they get in transactions. They feel ripped off. They start blaming merchants and entrepreneurs for feeling ripped off. And it really passes this whole market structure. And of course, it leads to counteractions against markets. And then intellectuals tend to capitalize on these counteractions.
Yeah, very interesting. I will come back to this topic because I don't want to divert too much from your story, actually. But I do have a very, very unique question. Not unique, but interesting question that I was discussing with somebody I know very well about this topic of inflation and distortion and the causes and the consequences. But before I ask you that question, can we go back to your story? So you started studying these schools of economics, and then you Did you discover gold first? Were you a gold bug? How did you come into Bitcoin? What let you come to Bitcoin?
Yeah. Yes, of course, I discovered the historical importance of precious metals in these old merchant monetary standards. And of course, I saw the history of devaluation and breaking of these standards. That was always an important insight in the Austrian school. So it most tended to go in the direction of being a gold bug. I never engaged in gold trading. I always had a dislike of that like core gold bug thing of selling overpriced gold to people that are afraid of what's going to happen. So I dislike that. I didn't engage much. And at the same time, I was an early internet adopter, and I valued the cypherpunk mindset. So I consider myself a cypherpunk from the value set and my interests. And that led me to digital money and gold. So I was
When was
early,
that?
I took
This was before
interest
Bitcoin.
in 90s, yeah, in the 90s and then under the early 2000s. So I was really interested in e-gold when e-gold emerged, and I tried to
Wow.
understand as much so about it. I enacted a kind of digital gold-based money system in a forum I was running at the time, which was a really strong German language forum. And I did the same principle, like having a ledger where you communicate basically these assignments to real physical gold that's somewhere in storage. And then I figured out the trust problem because suddenly I had to tell the CIA who I was in order to get a claim to the e-gold, because they just, of course, they took the hoard of gold and then they made up that, oh, he didn't have a license. It was this Mr. Jackson, at the time a doctor who started e-gold. And then the other just said that if you want to have something back of that gold, of course, only in fiat dollars, minus a handling fee and checking fee, you got to prove your identity. You got to tell us, where do you have the money from? Who are you? And there I realized, okay, that doesn't really work. They have like a centralized gold hoard somewhere and then just communicate digitally, because it's not the source of truth. It's where's the physical gold, and that can always be attacked. And yeah, then I had an interest in cryptography as well, and privacy. Probably it comes from this Iranian background. I think this skepticism towards structures, regimes, political orders, and yeah. So I never I appreciated this high trust surrounding in Austria, but I never shared in this common trust in the institutions in Austria. I always thought they are corrupted. I thought that's the natural way. If you have wrong incentives, things corrupt over time. So I always valued liberty and privacy. And it was a gradual process understanding it. And I took a really interest in the tools that make that possible. And that's, I read the reason, of course, I discovered Bitcoin very early, but then my economic knowledge led me to discard it very early as well. So I was pretty sure as you can get, that
But why?
it'll be a fad. Well, there are various reasons for that. The first reason is that the first people that really cared about it were US libertarians. So I first read about Bitcoin in a forum called antistate.com. It's like this libertarian and anarchist leanings. And I've seen many like initiatives by libertarians, and I was very skeptical because I knew it's a tiny minority of people, and money has network effects, and it's for foreigners. It's for people who don't already trust each other. Otherwise, you had so many before Bitcoin emerged. There were like decades of experimenting with alternative money structures. A lot of it in Europe, but also a lot starting then on the internet. So I've seen a lot of these schemes come and go, and it was always like, yeah, I got my ideological buddies, and we have now our network, and we have a ledger, and then we want it to happen, but it doesn't really work. Like no one cares about it, no one's really using it. It's a kind of coupon structure usually. Yeah, it's your funny money that you use with some buddies, and I'll send you a little bit of that made up coin or this made up coin. And then we can convince ourselves, yeah, but that's the future of money. And so I was very skeptical because I knew money is for people who don't trust each other and it needs network effects. I also knew that it's a discovery process. So I was never negative about Bitcoin. I didn't say, oh, it's evil and people shouldn't try it out. I always said, oh, that's wonderful. It's another experiment. I'm pretty sure it'll fail. And if it doesn't fail, it'll, of course, be stopped by governments.
You just thought it would never catch up, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Because, I mean, the rationale for it was too ideological. Yeah. And if it's too ideological, it's always mean it's a niche of people. And I knew libertarians in the US had been trying for so long to like set up their alternative structures and settlements and countries and everything. And it always like fails. Then you have like three guys sitting around a table and they create four new countries at the same table. It never gets the network effect. It's something crazy. I think like a normal person would try to do like what's within their reach and do small steps first. And politics always leads to these like utopian schemes like, oh, I figured it out. Now I got to create the system, a new kind of thing. And then I thought it's just not workable. Like a regular person finds out where are my strengths and talents. And then very few of those people actually become entrepreneurs. So they create something new. But most people are not entrepreneurs. They wouldn't want to carry that burden of uncertainty on their shoulders. And then there's always the risk if those who are skeptical about a society to live in, they tend to be on the fringe, like fringe people. And some of those are losers, of course. They didn't make it. That's why they're angry about society. And of course, as a libertarian can be the same thing. You can blame government for anything that's going wrong in your life. And if we had the perfect system and if we had the perfect money, everything would be great in my life. I would have a girlfriend. I would have a job and so on. And that's a risk, if you're too critical, that was the fringe thing. And I thought, okay, yeah, a fringe money, it'll remain a fringe thing. And I thought economically it's not interesting.
Yeah.
Socially it's interesting, and it has all my sympathy. And then I really needed to see an economic use case, like for whom does it really make sense to use that kind of money? And I saw it first with Silk Road. So of course because I was a cypherpunk, I was enthusiastic about Silk Road. So
what year was that? 13?
Yeah, somewhere around that.
Yeah, 13, yeah.
And 12, 13. And there I could compare like the street prices of drugs in Vienna with the market prices on Silk Road. And there I could see as an economist immediately, that it adds value. There's a reason to do it. I mean, whatever your ideology, if you're a consumer of that kind of produce, you'll understand immediately, okay, there's a benefit for me in it. And that's economics. That's discovery of something that's mutually beneficial. It's not because most people, I'm very atypical. Like I'm interested in arguments and principles, and I like reading. And I like reading about ideas that are opposed to mine. That's very unusual. Like I'm a freak in that regard. For most people, it's just you want to have a good life and you learn by doing something and you learn from your friends what has been working for them. And you don't go like from first principles and ideas. You look what's working and what's working for me and my family. And that's how things are adapted and passed on. But also, of course, this first use case for Bitcoin made it clear, oh, wow, it starts like with the worst possible thing is there's a war on drugs. It's linked to the US for sure. I mean, you have the most powerful government going after you. It has all my sympathy. It's like the David against Goliath thing. It's not because I have sympathy in drug consumption. I wasn't even a consumer, but just really curiosity. And the joy in having markets, like seeing people meet and have mutual beneficial value and discover that. But I knew, okay, if that really catches on, if like lots of people use that, of course you have attack vectors. You'll have police check the points where people withdraw the sendings. You'll have the mail traffic check. and everything happened. Of course, I didn't foresee how it would happen, but eventually it didn't work out. It was shut down. But fortunately for Bitcoin, there were other use cases that like increasingly explained a bit higher prices, a bit higher valuation. Um, but of course, I mean, my skepticism and this gradual approach of discovery made me miss out a lot. But everyone who's in Bitcoin has this story of regret.
Yes. Okay, and when did you realize that you actually are wrong and you changed your mind eventually?
Oh, it was gradual. It's like every other
Okay.
use case I discovered. The next use case was in China, like when entrepreneurs told me that they
Mhm.
use it to circumvent capital controls. Then, of course, that was something I could understand. I couldn't foresee it. I had no idea that Chinese entrepreneurs would be using Bitcoin. But then I say, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you want to do that? I'm not judging it. I think it makes a lot of sense. And so, of course, that's where I saw Bitcoin could have more than a few dollars in value, maybe $100. And between 10 and $100 was like, okay, yeah, if it helps circumventing capital controls, it will make things like something like that. So I would be the genius economist buying a few Bitcoin for $10 and selling them for $100 and feel like, wow, it's finally economics is useful for something. I figured out something.
Wow.
But of
But
course,
it went much higher than $100,
of course,
as we know.
so gradual discovery.
Yes, yes. Interesting, very interesting. I love your story. Um, Rahim, let's go back to our conversation we just had about economics and the consequences of Keynesian economics and so on. You mentioned your birthplace, which is the same place as mine, Iran, which is catastrophic, the situation, what we are witnessing right now, a humanitarian crisis. As you know, more than 40 or 50,000 people have been massacred on the streets of Iran, which is very, very unfortunate. Very, very, very sad story. Um, I don't want to talk too much about the blood that has been done there or the damage, the humanitarian damage, but from a perspective of actually, it's actually very, very sad. To be honest, I have to stop watching the videos and watching the pictures online because it really, really hits hard on me because I grew up in that country, and when I see the streets and people are being killed on the street, it really breaks my heart. It's very hard to talk about it. But you mentioned that inflation is generally the reason for inflation, as we always argue in the Bitcoin space and in the Austrian economics, is money printing or the creation of more units of currency. Do you agree with that first?
Yeah, but there's different, something different with hyperinflation. Like
Yes.
we really have like a trust breaking as well, and there are different rationales for inflation. Usually, it's the hidden tax. So it's a way to tax people and to fund structures. And every regime that's based on coercion needs funding for a policeman, the military, the paramilitaries in Iran. It's really an economic structure. Um, and so the incentives are very strong to use that. Yes, it's a production of money. That's true. You could call that money printing. In Iran, there is still more printed. So a lot of people still use the physical cash, was crazy, like the loads of money
Yes.
that you'd use in more banking banked societies. Of course, it's very digital. It's not physical printing like the
Actually, this
physical
is
money.
not the. This is just to give you an update on that because I talk to Iranians and my family lives there. It has actually been digitized almost completely because they want to control people's accounts, and you actually cannot withdraw as much cash as you could in the past. But this is like already since a few years like that. I mean, it's a very closed system, right? Because they're completely sanctioned from the world. You cannot send money into the country, you cannot send money out of the country, but the banks, they have their own SWIFT network, if you will, and everybody is using cards. Like there is actually no cash. And obviously this makes it much easier to print even more money because it's digital. And we always talk about the nightmare in the US or in Europe or anywhere else of having a CBDC. But in Iran, they almost have a CBDC because you cannot actually use cash because it's worthless. The cash that you can withdraw is almost worthless. You would have to carry kilos of cash in order to pay for stuff. Plus, you cannot even withdraw as much as you want. So, and the other reason why they don't want you to be able to withdraw this much is control, right? Because if they want to cut you from demonstrations, they just shut down your bank account. That's the system of control that we are so scared of, right? And it's already happening in Iran. But my question is more about the economic part of this, Rahim. I had this argument with a family member a few months ago about sanctions and money printing. He was saying the reason we have so much inflation is actually sanctions. It's not money printing, it's actually sanctions. And I was arguing that this may be true, but only indirectly, right? Because the direct consequence of inflation can only be more units of that currency to circling around, which can be caused by sanctions, but not necessarily. We see so many other countries like Pakistan, India, they don't have sanctions, but they have inflation, if not hyperinflation, right? So
Yes.
what are your thoughts on that?
Well, of course, the US, the Euro, the Japanese, they produce more money, much more money than Iran is producing. So you can look at it in absolute terms, but their currencies are propped up by demand for the currencies. So everyone engaging in global exchange these days has to demand dollars, digital dollars for payment reasons. And everyone who wants to do business in Europe has to demand euro and so on. And it's propping up the value, of course. So there's supply and demand, and there's a supply side of money. That's the money production, and there's the demand side. That's actual the market, the importance of a market, and that leads to the demand for the currency. So, of course, sanctions lead to much less demand for the local currency, and it becomes something totally disconnected from the rest of the world. And then it's entirely artificial. Like then, of course, immediately every more production of money will lead to a direct decrease of purchasing power because there's no other outside demand going for money. There's some inside demand. You still need it for transactions. There's very little savings demand that also, of course, has an impact. How uncertain do people perceive the situation? How do they think, like, do I need to make savings for the next 3 months? And is the local currency good enough for that? So that's a reason for some on the demand side and holding it. Of course, no one in his right mind would save in the Iranian rial at the moment. It's quite a typical situation, but it's true. Yes, the sanctions make it much worse.
Yeah, it just exaggerates the problem, right?
Yes, but it's just, I mean, that's the symptom. That's what you see.
Yes.
It's the value of money. It wouldn't be stupid to now blame the outside world and saying only because of the sanctions. The same thing happening in Venezuela. Like, oh, the sanctions are also like a symptom of something. And it's choices by Iran. They valued this kind of anti-Western sovereignty. And there's something you can respect about it. And of course, that's this national identity of Iran that made it easy for the Islamic Republic to use that as fuel. And they achieved something. I mean, they are the power in the region that Israel took seriously and the US took seriously for a while. And so that's an achievement this government is proud of. I think it was a really stupid choice to make. It's not at all worth the price the population has to pay. but it's a geopolitical choice. So my approach in geopolitics, which is inspired by the old Austrian tradition, is to be very like look at it like a natural catastrophe. Don't go like from the judgmental point of view, but try to understand first, and then see that we can really shape geopolitics as individuals. We can only adapt to that. And I think if I had grown up in Iran, of course, the best advice I could give myself from the future is leave as early as you can, because if you see it going down a wrong direction, if you value the things I'd value, which is like this individual liberty and make your own choices, and I didn't care too much about the pure society that was meant to be created there. And I've seen it failing. I've seen how religion has been really destroyed by being politicized in Iran. So even this end goal, and I can respect it. I can respect that if you look at the world today, if you look at American society, European societies, there is a genuine like tradition that could claim, no, we want to have it differently. We want to have a religion-based order. We want to have a morality-based order. Want to have a more traditional order and adapt it to modernity. That's all something that I respect on the intellectual level as a choice. But because I know how politics works, I was always skeptical about it. You can't order that. You can't make people moral top down. It will always destroy the thing you want to save. And that's just what happened in Iran. But for the current situation, it's really unfortunate. I don't think it leads you anywhere to like blame the regime more. We all took our choices in not being there. I've waited my whole life for that regime to fall. And no one would have expected that it takes so long and still around. But regimes don't fall from the street. That never happens. It's always like the second layer of a regime that takes over. So it's a coup-like thing. That's how socialism fell. Then, of course, you have people on the street and on the German wall, but it's like parts of the elites that shift the legions. So it was always very risky to try to turn now this unrest into a kind of regime change operation. That's very risky. It turns into civil war. That's what's happened. And civil war always means a lot of civilian deaths. So I'm not trying to like rationalize what the regime is doing, which is an unjust, not working regime, really one of the worst around. But we need to be careful in looking at it from an ideological point of view. I would not have recommended Iranians to flock to the streets and attack, like see it as a kind of war that can be won because you have the Air Force of the US supporting you. Because then you need to know that you are launching war, and war is different. I respect people who took that choice to arm. That means you arm yourself, you have a guerrilla warfare, and that happened partly. But you can't have both. You can't have like the peaceful civilian in the streets that just show to the regime, hey, there are large numbers of people that are not satisfied, and wage war at the same time. You've got to make a choice. And if you wage war, you know it's a choice. Your son may die in that war. And sometimes it can be worth it. I'm not a pacifist. Sometimes it's worth it. But if you look at the Iranian regime, it's very peculiar in that it has a paramilitary structure that has a strong economic force behind it. And that force has been strengthened by sanctions, because it made it even more difficult for other private businesses to operate. So you got to be a business affiliated with the Revolutionary Guards to use the smuggling networks, the money laundering networks, the sanction evading networks, your contacts with Russia and China and so on. So it's a strengthened paramilitary regime of a bit similar to Venezuela, but even worse. Right? Even worse than Venezuela. Venezuela is quite similar, and also, of course, Iranian politicians seem to be inspired by Chavez at the time, and it's the same play. It's like we want to be our own sovereign anti-American. Anti-American usually means like a bit more socialist. So they have the Cubans come in and help them and prop them up. And for Iran, it's the Arabs in the region, the Palestinians, the Lebanese, Hezbollah, that are their troops, like the Cubans for the Venezuelans. And they have the Venezuelans have the colectivos, which like the Revolutionary Guards, the protectors of the revolution. So it's quite similar. Still, I mean, what's the advice you give to a Venezuelan? It's like, why haven't you left Venezuela yet? What are you doing there? You gotta get out of that structure, even though it's hard. Then you can support family that can't make it out. But if you want to wage war, like make good bets and be sure what you're getting yourself into.
Do you see a path out of the current situation? Regime change? Do you see that happening?
Yes, but not like the Shah marching in. It'll be a coup. But of course, the likeliest thing is a coup d'état, like
From
parts of the
within
military.
from within the own
Yes.
government.
That's usually the only way, because I mean, I don't see how the Kurds and the Arabs, it's like the only groups that could have their own structure and be armed, take up arms and and it'll be nasty. You know, that's what happened in Iraq and elsewhere. It's when regime change happens, usually arm like the insurgents, and the insurgents usually have identitarian reasons for being insurgents. And that's either Sunni in Iran, and they'll be very nasty. That's the ISIS Daesh style insurgents that they've been fighting for a long time, the regime, and it's Kurds. But the Kurds are weakened now. So I think the only likely scenario is like within the structure, and that could be someone with a very legitimate claim. I think the family of Khomeini, if they can gather around them, or Khamenei, even gather around them some disgruntled parts of the elite. But that'll be like a legitimacy led, like let's go back to the true good form of the Islamic Revolution, and because the Revolutionary Guards overstepped and something like that. But of course, the regime has been toughened for a long time, for decades, and they have cut the military structure, like they politicized the military structure. They empowered even more the Revolutionary Guards. So it's there's no like an officer guard that could immediately take over. It'll be mid-rank soldiers band together, but it's a tough call. So there are paths, but they are either nasty or mean some change within the regime. And Iran has been doing that many times. They always switch between reformers and the tough guys. And that's politics, which is unfortunate. And as a final way, if they see really they are under pressure by the US, I think they'll present some kind of reformed phase that enters negotiations with the US. That's, I think, already happening. And then present themselves as a more humane phase, a bit more Western friendly. Again, what has happened many times of the regime. And then it could be a gradual process, like trying to restrain the Revolutionary Guards through a political process. But still, I mean, you have to pay off those people. You could the best possible scenario is they become oligarchs. They become oligarchs and enrich themselves even more, because if Iran has access to the world economy, it has a huge potential. Like, you can make so much money if you are already an oligarch. And that's how the Soviet Union, of course, fell. It's like the former people close to the regime become the oligarchs, and they are satisfied with it. And they say, okay, I don't need to worry about the politics. Just let me keep the money. And if you can propose that, that's usually the way out. So you see, it's a very unusual analysis of geopolitics, very down to earth, very realist. Because, of course, as a person, I feel like you. I'm very passionate about what's happening, and I feel the pain as an analyst. Like, you need to be very neutral.
I mean, a lot of people, though, are for a complete change back to the old-fashioned Shah regime, right? I mean, this is not me saying that. I mean, a lot of people it's very hard to get the data, obviously, out of the country because the internet has been
Yeah.
blacked out and
Yes.
everything. But based on what we have seen so far, I've seen his name basically said in every
Yes.
single video.
Yeah.
He has a lot of supporters in Iran, especially among the young people. And I was actually hearing one person or a few people say, we didn't even know this guy exists until now.
Yes.
We didn't even know
Yes.
this guy exists. We didn't even know that somebody exists. But I mean, his position is also very clear. He wants there to be an election. Could be also a lie. You don't know. But it's very tough. I don't know what to say. It's very, very tough. I have family
No,
there. I just hope
that's
things
a
will
meme,
unfold.
you know.
Yes, go
It's
ahead.
a meme. It's cool. Everyone knows, like the meme of the Shah in Iran, and it's like longing. It's saying, yeah, even back then it was certainly better than it's now. Well, we wouldn't have expected that, but that's usually the case. But the
Yes.
Shah as a person, like the person, I no, I think there's a reason most people don't know him in Iran and haven't cared too much. So it can always, in politics, it can happen that you become a meme as a person. You step in the footsteps, but it's got nothing to do. Like the real person, uh, uh, which I think is certainly not of that size and format of his grandfather. Um, and so on. So I'm very doubtful. I don't see like a process only like as a symbol, as represent something. And of course, it'll be a best case scenario if it happens out with a constitutional monarchy. But I don't see that happen. Like the current person he's not a military leader that could unite behind his back if it turns into a kind of guerrilla thing, and that's always the case. He does not have a structure in Iran. He hasn't been around. He's been a civilian for a very long time. When he gave up, basically as a kid, he gave up any real chance at stepping into the footsteps of his father.
But I
Yeah, I
also
mean, still as a
think I also think that his name is mainly used because of desperation.
yes, yeah,
People just want
yeah,
to come out of this. I obviously I watch a lot of content about this as well, and there was one person saying it's not about the Shah.
yeah.
It's just a symbol of
Yes, that's what I
freedom.
mean.
Yeah, we
Yes,
just want freedom. We just want
yes,
Iran to become free and Iran to
yes,
become a
yes,
different country. That's why we all
yes.
scream Shah, Shah,
And of
Shah,
course,
Javid Shah.
of course, I mean, as a meme, it's obvious. It's the opposite of the Islamic regime. It's like goes at the core of the legitimacy. It's
Yeah.
like they displaced the unjust Shah. That's the whole story. And so you need to go against that. So that's why the name, the symbol of the Shah, has this importance. But the real backing is weak. And I never see like this kind of election structure. No, that be naive. That would be Western naive. Has been a mistake of the US for a long time, like this kind of regime change. See, in instituting US kind of democracy, come on, it's not even functional in the US. So how is it going to work in another place? And you have to respect that now a minority in Iran, but still a sizable one, don't want the country to be westernized. They don't want it to be safe for democracy. They don't want that. Their whole identity is linked um, to something else that they've grown up with, being opposed to that, and then like going into a nation scale election is just a recipe for more civil war potentially along the lines. Like imagine that, because you and it's in every country now happening. You have populations that are completely apart, and they would hate their guts. They would be the complete enemies of each other. So it needs a different process, a more decentralized structure. It needs to a way to cope with different people, a way to have special zones like the Emirates are doing, like figuring out, okay, we are not going against Islam, but we make it possible for Westerners to live under different rules, and it's in different territorial zones. It's sometimes overlapping, and that's the only right way. And it worked better in these authoritarian settings of the Emirates, and it works to extent in Saudi Arabia. It would never have worked with an election-based setup. Like if all the Emirati now take like binary choices of the majority, and not even the majority, is like a party system is terrible. It's like you have 30% of the people determining the outcome, and it's always like who organizes better. And in an age of like social media and all the propaganda that's possible, it's really not a functional system. So you can count on, like, you see the pictures from Tehran and you think, yeah, of course, 90% of Iranians will vote for the Shah, and then it'll be fine. And the mullahs, or the pseudo mullahs will say, oh yeah, we accepted the outcome. We didn't know you thought like that. That's not going to happen. So there I'd be very realistic. Just as a Westerner, you have to admit, come on, let's stop telling the world how to run themselves. And the Shah, because he's grown up in the US, he'll speak in these terms. And a lot of Iranians think that, yeah, actually it's that easy. Like, just let's have a fair election. But having kind of elections was really bad for Iran, because it's got a lot of this energy into wrong leads. Like, you have always this, and you had elections in Iran, and you have these reformers. It's all filtered, of course, but it's not that much different from a Western democracy these days. You have self-selection processes. It's like a small group of people that run for different parties. It's much more important who controls the structures around it. In the West, it's academia and media and all the gatekeepers, the NGOs and so on. And in Iran, it's the Revolutionary Guards. So I'm not rationalizing that system. I'm just saying, don't make the mistake of being naive and thinking you can impose a kind of already dysfunctional structure.
What system do you think would work for Iranians?
A decentralized structure. It's like, work with what you are having, open up the Kish Island economic zone into really an Emirates-like special economic zone, and then go for there from the border areas, from the port areas, parts of the city. Tehran has to be replaced. Or say it's failing, it doesn't work as a city. The whole infrastructure is like, it's ruined. You can't support that many people. So you need to create a new city. But let's not have the Islamic regime like prop up an artificial new city like in Egypt. That's not working. That will be terrible. Let the diaspora, let investors come in and create a new city in Iran. And it will be a Western style open city. And all the people from northern Tehran that don't like the other people in the rest of Iran could move there if they like to make that step. I think that there'll be different rules, like old European structure, old Ottoman structure, the history. Decentralized, different rules for different areas. Don't try to do the mistake of the Shah, modernizing the country all at once. Like, you go from enforcing the Chador to the opposite. It's like outlawing it. Don't do that. Don't make the same mistakes of top-down modernizing the country. Give it space, attract investment, attract the diaspora of Iranians. There's so much potential. And then if things grow, you don't have this opposition. It's like, yeah, even if you have your traditional lifestyle, it'll be a better quality of life, but you don't have to go. You don't have to go to the special zones and go drinking and have a party, things like that. But also the traditional part of Iran has to understand it's better to have your young people. And they understand it. That's why the regime doesn't have that much backing. Even the traditional people understand, the regime has not done well for religion or for traditional lifestyles. The demography is terrible. You're not even having more kids. That's what you'd think, like, if you're not westernizing, that at least you'd have more kids. No, Iran is dying out. Religion is fading. People are getting less Muslim every day. And give a chance, a lifeline of hope for the traditional part and the anti-Western part of Iran. That's still there. You can call it brainwashing, but it's there to maintain that and not be part of a party structure now. Where everyone decides on everything or thinks is deciding on everything. And now we decide, should we modernize that or modernize this? And that's impossible. That's not on a nation level debate. You can have that. It'll have identitarian conflicts. You have radicalized groups that will be terror cells. So it'll be Iraq or Syria. It'll be like Syria. Don't do that. And that's the big risk of US intervention, Israeli intervention, or like European interventions. Usually just give money, but they give money to the wrong kind of structures.
Yes, very interesting take. I see your point. I hope the best will unfold for Iranians and we will end up having a free Iran again, hopefully. I mean, I'm not sure about your age, but I've never seen Iran free. So ever since I was born, Iran was not free. I hope I can visit Iran again and I can see the country flourish. I bet if Iran becomes free and it becomes actually can use its potential, there's going to be a lot of competition in the Middle East. And I think that the UAE will have a difficult time to keep everybody here because a lot of people would want to go to Iran to build businesses and so on and so forth. I mean, this is also going to increase, but I think it's going to be good for the world. I think it's going to be good for the region. If we have a free Iran, it's not going to be only good for the Iranians, it's going to be good for everybody, including Muslims or even people who are radical, in my opinion, because it's so sad that I've heard stories where even radical Islamists have turned against the regime because they have no food on the table. They're starving, right? At the end of the day, money talks. If you don't have the money, you cannot have a functioning society. No matter what they believe, no matter what their religion is, it doesn't actually make any difference. Right? So I think it's in the best interest of everybody involved, of every counterparty or parties involved, that we have a free Iran. And yeah, Rahim, thank you so much for coming on. We've been on over an hour now. Do you have any thoughts that you want to close the conversation with? Any thoughts about the topic we discussed? Anything?
Yeah, well, to connect the dots, of course, Iran is one of the most crucial markets for Bitcoin adoption now. And let's hope that Bitcoin is really a useful tool there. It's a challenge. I always hope for more. I'd expect more. It should have been going for a much longer time, have much a wider adoption, but there's a real need, a real problem, as opposed to spoiled Westerners that already use the digital money and still trust the structures. I think, it was going to happen. I trust politics, kind of thing. In Iran, and you've learned the hard way. And I really hope that people figure out the advantage that Bitcoin could offer them. And then it'll be an exciting showcase for the world to be added to it. But we need more innovation there. I would hope for have mesh networks being used, non-internet based ways of communicating value. I hope that using BitChat already could be a lifeline of hope going in that direction. And then, of course, using Bitcoin as a tool to connect around the world, connect the diaspora, make it a way to help people on the ground without exposing them to risk and something like that. That's where Bitcoin can really shine, and where it's not about ideology. It's where even people are skeptical about it can see, okay, now I see why it adds value to those people. I'm not one of those people, but those people certainly have a legitimate reason to use it. So I think that's a big hope I have. And then everything you said about Iran, of course, is the way of thought of the Austrian school. It's more positive sum exchange is better for everyone. That's why we want to have economies integrated and tap into the potential of people. And yeah, So I share that hope, and even though I'm a very realist person, fundamentally I'm an optimist and a long-term optimist. Also because another insight of the Austrian school, in long-term economics trumps politics, and that's exactly what you said. Like if you can't support yourself, you can maintain the life of yourself and your children. You can talk about ideology all time long, but it's usually just a sect of people that get even crazier when everything fails around them, and they double down. Most people like realize and learn from it and see, okay, bread on the table first, and then we'll talk ideology, and it's really a luxury thing.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, 100%. Bitcoin is built for exactly that, to build prosperity and build economics from the ground up. And I hope for Iranians to find this out. I'm willing to go there and teach everybody I can about Bitcoin if we get a chance to do that. Rahim, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you? Give us your handles, give us your website. Where can people find you and your work and see you flourish?
On X, it's Conarium_AT. I hope you can link it in some
I
show
will
notes.
link it in the description for sure.
H is a Latin word. SCH, Scholarium, and Scholarium.at is a website. They can find me.
Wonderful. We'll put the links in the show note. Again, thank you so much for coming on. Rahim, I really, really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful time. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.